Hello and welcome to Nothing Definitive. This is a audio recording taken on January 10th, 2014.
It's weird when we have thoughts where, that thought that I had when I was looking into the mirror and I realized that I am my brain, not my consciousness, or I'm not a separate entity. It's weird to think that rather than that just being a thought, and rather than all these revelations having this emotion behind them, they're never just, I don't just have the thought oh, that's myself, okay, and I move on. We can have bland thoughts, and then these thoughts that are followed by almost this your brain just stopping and thinking, and that's almost like a glitch or a malfunction, or you're doing something where there's actually that's the dawning, your brain has to absorb it, and there's an emotional impact. That's really actually bizarre to think about. What's actually going on in your brain at that moment when you're processing this thought? It's like your consciousness, perhaps that's one of those moments where your consciousness is actually allowing your brain side to realize something that's truly bizarre, what causes it to almost glitch out in a way. It's a weird thought.
I'm going to pause here for a sec because I wanted to, first of all, bring up that I don't exactly remember what it was that I was talking about, at least not specifically. I do know what I, in a general sense, what I was talking about, but I'm not sure what actually triggered the thought at the time. There's this weird effect that I experienced, I don't know, maybe a few weeks ago or something like that, maybe not even a couple weeks, where I was meditating kind of under the influence, and I was having these epiphanies here and there, and it was, I actually had this feeling of an epiphany. It wasn't just oh, that's a good idea. It was like this chemical reaction that exploded inside my brain that felt, I don't even know how to describe it. Like a bunch of chemicals were suddenly dumped somewhere in my brain, and it felt like sunshine or something like that. It felt like warm light inside of my head. I mean, that's probably a very inadequate description, but that's about the best I can do. And I think that's what I'm referencing in this. It was back in January, like I said, and that was a couple months ago, and I'm slowly taking some of these archived audio recordings and posts and stuff and uploading them to this YouTube channel. So a lot of these are older, and I can't quite remember exactly what it was that made me want to make these recordings. But I'm assuming that I must have had one of those sort of, it's like a light bulb moment or a dawning realization where it's not just the realization that you had a realization. It's actually an emotional reaction, and it feels cool, positive, energetic. I don't know. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And then there's a little bit more of the recording I'll play right now.
Also, I'm still really convinced that this is an IQ booster or something. I mean, these are real thoughts. I keep telling myself, what if they're not real? But I'm almost doing that at the benefit of others. If I'm being honest with myself, these feelings of depth are real. It adds up. It doesn't seem even remotely irrational or miscalculated.
Okay, so that last part is about allegedly being under the influence of some substances, and the sort of, I mean, if you've ever experimented a bit with that kind of stuff and you can get past the initial stages of just oh, this is fun, this is like drinking alcohol, and it's recreational, and it's just for having a good time or making movies interesting or something. That's, I mean, it seems like a lot of people just get to that stage and they assume that's where the path ends. But if you can get past that and you can actually kind of enter in that zone where you don't really want to go because it's a little freaky. You can sit there and just sit in the dark and meditate. And you can face your thoughts and your inner demons or whatever, like there is a depth there. There's something there that is, in my mind, very real and very intriguing and very useful. I mean, we have a very negative attitude towards illicit substances in the United States, but that's primarily, in my opinion, due just strictly to ignorance. I mean, I would imagine that if you could get everyone to sit down and try these things for a few weeks, and they were actually utilizing them in the proper way and meditating and thinking, no one would go back. No, ever. No, I don't think there'd be very few people that would just not like it and want to go back. I think it's too alluring, it's too intriguing, and there's too much information to be gathered from it, in terms of being introspective and thinking of things and perspectives and angles and depth that you never even considered was possible. And that's the interesting thing about all this, is that, I mean, I mentioned there at the end of the recording, like, I question it a lot, but it's primarily due to me just wanting to, like, do it for social pressure, right? Like, don't enjoy it too much, or don't get too into it, because that's socially a really bad thing. And that might be for good reason. I mean, if you get too involved in stuff like that, it will be to the detriment of your like normal, sober, physical reality, and that is probably bad, I would imagine. But to always be negative towards it and assume that it is totally useless, that it's nothing more than just the recreational aspect of it, I think is pretty foolish. And I mean, it's hard to share the experience or what you get out of it unless you're familiar with it, and that's really the problem. Is there's a real barrier there between the people who have tried it and the people who haven't. You can't explain it to the people who haven't. I don't know how you would ever really do that, at least until we get something like I saw an article about two universities that had sent a brain signal across the internet and like forced some guy to press the spacebar on his keyboard. That sort of technology in the future, assuming it pans out, will allow us to share thoughts and maybe share perspective and things. And at that moment, I think a lot of people are going to go, oh, I could have been doing this the whole time. Like, why is this illegal, or why is this bad? I don't understand. Like, it's so innocuous. It's so, I mean, it's safer than things like alcohol and whatnot. So, I guess my point is just don't underestimate it. There's something very real there, and when you target your thoughts under the influence and you try and discount them or disprove them, a lot of times you can't really. They make sense, and it offers you something that's totally novel and, to me, incredibly useful, both there and in real life. So, something to think about. Thanks for listening as always, and stay tuned for future episodes. You can subscribe above, that's very helpful. Otherwise, see you next time. Or not.